Hi, I'm Kevin and welcome to my channel. Today, let's take a look at the Bluetti EB70 power station. A few weeks ago, Bluetti contacted me and asked if I would do a review of their EB70 power station. It's a new power station they've had out for a few months now. So I have been doing a ton of research about power stations. I've been reading about electronics and watching reviews about power stations. So if you're someone who's in the market for a power station, you're considering a purchase, I hope I can walk you through some of the technical jargon and give you some tips on what to look for. Now I'm going to walk you through some of the features and some of the pros and cons of this unit, but overall, I'll let you know right now, I consider this a very good unit, especially for its size and its price. So if you're in the market for a power station, I believe there's 5 things that you should be looking for before you make your purchase. 1 is regulated DC current. 2 is an alternating current that has a pure sine wave. 3 is that you have a battery management system. 4 would be an MPPT solar controller. And 5, I would make sure that that power station can accept a charge and discharge at the same time. This checklist is going to help you weed out some of the posers in the market, some of those unbelievable deals. It's going to help you ensure that you've got a reasonably good power station. After checking off everything on the list, after that, it's all about the battery and the quality of those components. All right, so let's do a quick overview of this system as a whole, and then we'll get into some of the details. First off, the EB70 has a 716 watt-hour battery. That's essentially how big the battery is and how long it's going to last you, and that's going to be good for most sort of regular tasks. If you're in a power outage or if you're camping, that's going to last you a fairly long time. It also has a 700 watt inverter, which is again going to handle most of your tasks. It won't handle big power tools, but it's going to handle a lot of kitchen equipment. It's going to power refrigerators and certainly handle your electronics. Speaking of powering, it's got a number of outputs. In fact, it's got 12 different power outputs, including an induction charger on top for modern cell phones. It's got USB-C, it's got the regular USB quick charge, 2 DC barrel ports, as well as a regular car charging port. On the AC side, it's got 4 outputs, which is significantly more than most of its competitors. So overall, I think this is a great size and has output features that are ideal for car camping, power outages, or if you're trying to run some light power tools off-grid. The Bluetti has a 2-year warranty, and it comes in black, red, and this color that the company calls mint green. But I kind of dispute that because this is actual mint green, not the same color at all. But whatever, we'll go with it. So I've taken a good look at the reviews online, and let me tell you, there's quite a lot of them. This product is averaging about 4.6 or 4.7 stars out of 5, which is really, really good. As an example, Crazy Woman Ranch, she left a comment on Amazon, and she said, 5 out of 5 stars, gotta love this little turquoise charger. Turquoise, that's what this is. So let's talk about the size of this unit. I think it's a really unique size at 700 watts. If you look at its competitors, Jackery and Goal Zero, they both make an awful lot of power stations at 500 watts or below. As well, those 2 manufacturers make an awful lot of power stations 1,000 watts and above, but neither of them make anything in this 700 watt range. Bluetti also makes a number of units above 1,000 watts and below 500 watts, but this one is in a real sweet spot. So I think 700 watts is a real sweet spot in the market for power stations. It's a real smart place for Bluetti to be. It's a size where you can run a substantial load for a substantial period of time, and it's still small enough that it's quite portable. It's got a handle, and the device does weigh 21 pounds, so it's not light, but you can easily move this around. You're not going to take this backpacking, but you can take it car camping. You can move it around your house in a power outage. So as you get into larger power stations, into 1,000 or 1,500 or even 2,000 watts, those power stations are going to get a lot heavier and more difficult to move around, or they'll come on wheels. So I think this is a real practical size, a real handy size for a power station. So the Bluetti EB70 comes with a lithium iron phosphate battery, and I hadn't heard of that battery type before. This is new to me, and you might ask yourself, is this battery type any good? And yes, it is. It's excellent. It's really a superb battery type, and here's why. Although the battery chemistry is really quite interesting, you don't need to know very much about the chemistry in order to appreciate what the battery can provide. Probably the most important feature of a lithium iron phosphate battery is how long it lasts. If you compare this to other battery types like lead acid or lithium ion batteries, it's going to last an awful lot longer. The traditional lead acid sealed battery is going to give you a couple hundred recharges before the battery starts to decline in function. A lithium ion battery is going to give you about 500, probably more, but about 500 recharges before it starts to decline in function. The lithium iron phosphate battery, though, is going to give you 2,500 recharges before the battery starts to decline in function. So that's a really significant difference, and that means that this battery type is going to last an awful long time. Even if I use this every day, it's going to last years and years. And lithium iron phosphate batteries are also non-combustible, so they're an awful lot safer than lithium ion batteries. And another great feature is that lithium iron phosphate batteries are significantly less expensive than lithium ion batteries. Now, Jackery and Goal Zero make most of their power stations using a lithium ion battery, except Goal Zero still makes a few with lead acid batteries. So let's look at the final market price for some of these units in terms of cost per watt hour. If you look at Jackery, most of the units about the same size come in at about $1 per watt hour. The Goal Zero units are a little more pricey. They come in at about $1.40 per watt hour. And the Bluetti EB70 gives the best value at about 75 cents per watt hour. So this is going to be a much more affordable unit if you consider the amount of power that can be stored and delivered. So it's impossible for these things to come in at 100% efficiency. You're not going to get all of those 719 watt hours stored in this battery. You're not going to get those same watt hours out. There's always heat lost at the battery or in the inverter. I've looked at a lot of the efficiency tests done for this power station, and most of them are pretty good. They tend to range between 580 and 640 watt hours of actual power delivery, which isn't bad. 580 is a little bit on the low side. That's about 80%. 640 is at 89%. Most of the tests, though, are coming in at 88 or 89% efficiency, which isn't terrible, but it isn't great. It would be nicer if those tests came in at a more consistent 90% or above. So the only real downside I see to a lithium iron phosphate battery is that it doesn't have the same energy density characteristics that other battery types do. A lithium iron phosphate battery is going to weigh about the same as a lithium ion battery, but it's going to take up a little more space. And checklist item, the Bluetti EB70 has a BMS or battery management system that's going to help regulate the discharge from the battery and make sure the battery doesn't overheat. It's going to do its job as a bit of electronic brain and try and protect your battery. So let's talk about the inverter for a little bit. I've had this for a few weeks and I really like this inverter. It's a 700 watt inverter that allows peaking at 1400 watts. That's really good because sometimes, especially with motors, when you first start them up, they're going to take a little more power to get going. Once they get going, there's some inertia and they're not going to draw as much. So this will accept a pretty substantial peak. And the inverter in this unit has another feature that I really like. It's part of my checklist. It has a pure sine wave output on the AC outputs. And that's fairly important. That's going to help protect electronics that might be run out of there, but it's also going to be good for running motors. Any motor that you run is going to run more efficiently and drain the battery an awful lot less if you have a pure sine wave inverter. So I've got to say that I'm really, really impressed with the inverter in this power station. You do expect to get those 700 watts out of the inverter that as advertised. You do expect it to accept some peaking up to 1400 watts, but peaking should really only last a couple of seconds. I ran a coffee maker for 5 minutes that was pulling 800 watts with this thing. Anything that generates a lot of heat is going to pull a lot of watts, and I ran that coffee maker for 5 minutes without this unit shutting off. So I think this inverter is really good. It's really robust. It's going to give you the power that you need for most applications. So I'm starting to lose my light here. So let's go inside and talk about some more of the specifics of the outputs and inputs and actually start plugging some stuff in. All right, so we've come into the workshop and let's take a closer look at the outputs of the EB70 and what sort of things it can charge. First off, it's got this cool wireless charging 15 watt station. It's an induction charger and it'll charge modern cell phones like my daughter's cell phone. You've just got to be a little careful to get it just right. You can't just throw it on any which way. There we go. It's charging. That's pretty handy. You don't have to keep track of your cord if you've got one of these around. Another awesome feature is that this has not one but two USB-C PD3 ports. This is what modern technology like my daughter's MacBook will charge from, and these two ports are 100 watts, which is going to charge this book up in no time at all. Nexus has a couple of 5 volt 3 amp or quick charge USB-A ports. Let's plug a few things into that. Here's a flashlight, and here's a couple of camera batteries that I can plug into here. Next, this has two 12 volt 10 amp barrel ports. These are 5.5 millimeter diameter ports. Very popular among the car camping crowd. I don't have anything that'll plug into this, but a lot of folks will get adapters that plug into there and give you an extra car charger. And next is a car charger, a 12 volt car charger. It's got a cover on it, which is really nice because some of the competitors don't have that. Let's put something substantial in here. I've got this DC cooler that I can plug into there. We're at 83 watts. Let's plug some stuff into the AC side. So I've got a battery charger here that is designed to charge batteries for power tools. Let's plug that in. That certainly makes some noise. Let's plug in this heater fan, and we're just going to turn it on to fan mode. Let's plug in a small food processor. So I've got a laptop, a cell phone, flashlight, power tool, battery charging, running a fan, running a small cooler, and a small kitchen appliance, and I'm only pulling 160 watts out of this. At this rate, this battery is going to last 3 or 4 hours. So you can really plug in a diversity of things if you need a lot of stuff on the go at once, or you can run something like your fridge and it's going to last for days. Okay, let's turn on the heat here. Turn on the power button so we can read the screen and turn on some heat, small room heat, and all of a sudden we're ramping up really, really quickly to 500 watts. I'm going to go to a larger room. Oh, it cut out, and I get an overload signal. The DC is still charging. Just the AC is not charging. So that's interesting. All right, it'll reset, and I'm back in business. So we've run a bunch of different little things. Let's see how much heat we can produce with different appliances. Running the fan, 13 watts. Turning it on low, 426 watts. Turn it up one more notch. It cuts out. And just for kicks, I thought I'd try a few other appliances that would push the limits of the inverter. She's on. I'm going to put on keep warm, which should be the lowest setting. Takes a second for it to come on here. It tripped right away. So this is drawing too many watts. Let's try this hot plate. Plug her in and turn on the smallest burner. And we are pulling 500 watts. So the burner is on the lowest setting. I'm going to turn it up. So this small burner at the highest setting is pulling 500 watts and the machine's running just fine. Let's turn that off. Let's turn on this larger burner. We are on. It's pulling over 800 watts. And I bet I can't turn this up without setting it off. Okay, I turn it up slowly. It's pulling 830 watts, and it's working. So you could run this hot plate off of here, but it's right at the edge. So just like the coffee maker test, this inverter is producing more than 800 watts, and it's remaining quite stable. All right, so how do you get a charge into this device? Well, it's got an 8mm barrel port here, and all the charging goes into that one port. You've got the option of this charging brick that plugs into an AC output. That'll plug right into there. And it's got these MC4 cables, which should plug into most solar panels on the market. And it's got this 8mm connector again that will plug right into here. Alternatively, you can plug it in to your vehicle. So charging with your car charger is going to take about 8 hours. Charging with the solar panels is really going to depend on your solar array. But the maximum input here is 200 watts. So it's going to take you at least 4 or 5 hours, again, depending on the size of your solar array and how sunny it is outside. And if you're charging the unit with this AC power brick, you're going to be able to do that in about 3.5 hours if you're charging from zero. But if you're only charging from, say, 20%, it's going to be much, much faster. Now, there's some issues with this power brick. It is large. It weighs about a pound, and it's quite noisy. Look at this. I'm going to plug this in. It delays and then it comes on. So there's a fan in here and it's on all the time even when it's not plugged into the power station. So we'll plug it in. We're charging at almost 200 watts, which is pretty good. That's what you want out of this thing. But the fan noise is incredible, and when this gets fully charged, this fan stays on. There's actually two fans in the system. There's one fan inside the EB70 which sucks air in one side and blows it out the other. That's relatively quiet and it shuts off when it needs to. But the fan inside the power brick never shuts off, and it's really quite loud. I've measured this at 52 decibels, and that's going to bother you if you're trying to sleep in the same room as this thing. And it's a real waste of energy that it's on all the time. In my opinion, this is one of the big flaws of the system, is this power brick. It's very loud, it's very noisy. And I just think it's poorly designed. So another issue I've got with this device is the design around the power input. It only accepts up to 8 amps. And that's a bit of an issue with solar power. It's not a problem with the car charger because you're not going to hit 8 amps. And it's not a problem with the AC power brick because you're going to have a higher voltage. So I don't have a large solar panel handy, but I do have this little 20 watt Goal Zero solar panel that happens to connect very well to the device. And this is grossly underpowered for this device. This is 20 watts. You're going to want at least 100 watts, if not 200 watts of power from a solar panel to charge this in a reasonable time. Ideally, you're going to get those 4.5 hours of charging in really good sunlight. But the problem with that 8 amp restriction on the input is that out of a 200 watt panel, most of them anyways, you're not going to get the full wattage out of that solar panel because they produce more than 8 amps. So anything over 8 gets wasted. So this restriction has been noticed in some of the reviews. Paul B on Amazon gives it 3 out of 5 stars, and he says he should have waited. He was unaware of the 8 amp charge limit when he ordered, and the info simply wasn't available. That makes his 2x100 watt panels in parallel, which should give 200 watts, only slightly better than 1x100 watt panel. So Paul might want to try and hook up his 100 watt panels in series rather than parallel, because then he'll double his volts rather than doubling his amps. And this device will take up to 28 volts at the input. Why it only takes 8 amps doesn't make much sense. So that 8 amp restriction is actually more of a problem for larger solar panels. Most 200 watt solar panels, including the Bluetti's own SP200, those solar panels are producing power at 20 volts and 10 amps to get 200 watts. And so with its own product that's relatively well matched, except for that restriction, you're going to be losing power out of the system. So if your solar panel is fully powered at 20 volts and you have an 8 amp restriction, then you're only going to be able to get 160 watts into that battery. So some folks who use solar panels to charge their power station are noticing this 8 amp restriction. You might ask yourself, how big a deal is this? Well, I don't think it's a deal breaker. No 200 watt solar panel is going to give you that full 200 watts. At best, on a really bright sunny day, you're likely going to get 180 watts out of that solar panel, and that's max. And at 180 watts, you're going to get a full charge in about 4 hours. So you're probably not sending a full 10 amps of current to the battery anyways. So under ideal conditions, that restriction might cost you 20 or 30 minutes of extra charge time. Let's talk about the control buttons. There's 3 control buttons on this unit. One to turn on and off the DC, one to turn on and off the AC, and one to turn on and off the light. There is no control button to turn on the display. If you want to get the display on, you're supposed to just turn this on by touching a button, and so it only turns on for 2 seconds, which is not enough time to read the display, and it's not enough time even for the display to ramp up and show you how full the battery is charged. Let's try that again. So just 2 seconds to read the display, and that can be really, really frustrating. So if you want longer to view the display, simply turn on one of these sides, and that display will stay on for 30 seconds. So I think the scale is all right, but it's quite minimal. It shows you the watts going into the machine, it shows you the watts coming out, and it tells you how full the battery is with this percent scale here. The percent scale is in 20% increments, so you don't know exactly how full the battery is. Most of the competitors show you exactly the percentage charge remaining in the battery, and they'll often calculate the time to be fully charged or the time to run out, depending if you're charging or discharging the unit. Another really common complaint I'm hearing a lot about is that it's hard to check the power display if you're powering something and you don't want to turn the power off. People are saying that in order to check the display, you've got to push the power button and turn off power, and that's a bit annoying. I sort of get that, but that has not been my experience. Here I am charging a couple of batteries on the DC side. The display is turned off. All I have to do is touch the power button quickly, and the display comes back on. I have not interrupted power. I can see that these batteries are charging and they're pulling 4 watts. So I don't know if those reviewers are actually testing this machine or if they're just copying the complaints of previous videos, but that has not been my experience. So let's talk briefly about the light and the control buttons. Like most power stations, this one comes with a little light here, and the buttons are a little counterintuitive. I turned it on, it didn't come on. Hold it down a little bit longer, it comes on the lowest setting. If you hold it down again, it seems to go to a higher setting. And one more time gives you some sort of a flashing, maybe distress kind of signal. It's not the most practical thing in the world. It's designed like a flashlight, but you're not going to carry this around like a flashlight. What would be really nice, I think, if you're going to add a light to one of these things, is just have a little light, perhaps on the top, that would provide some illumination to the table in front of this. Given that all the inputs are in the front, that would be kind of handy as opposed to having just a flashlight. But I think most manufacturers add a light simply because they can. So in conclusion, I really like this Bluetti EB70 power station. I think it's got a lot of excellent features. It does have a few drawbacks. The minor ones are the screen. The screen could be a lot better. The buttons could be more intuitive, that's for sure. And that DC input should be larger than 8 amps. It would be better if it was 10 or 12. Other than that, the only major flaw, I think, is the power brick, which is too loud and doesn't shut off when the machine isn't charging. And on the plus side, the components in here that really matter, the inverter and the battery, I think are excellent. That 700 watt inverter, I think, is underrated. I've been using it steadily at 800 watts, and it has not been giving me any trouble. So it's in my opinion, it's an excellent inverter. And I'm super excited about the lithium iron phosphate battery inside of here. I think it does 2 things for this unit in the marketplace. One, it brings the initial price down a little bit, which is great. And number 2, you're going to get a lot more life out of this battery chemistry than other types. Compared to a lithium ion battery, this battery is going to give you 5 times the life. And those 2 things combined, the lower price and the longer life, make this, in my opinion, the best value in the market right now. All right, guys, thanks a lot. I hope you enjoyed watching this review of the Bluetti EB70. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them down below. As always, I hope you have a great day. Here I am, I'm charging a couple batteries. The display is turned off. If I want to read the display, I'm just going to push that power button again, just briefly. The power's still on. Oh. Of course, I screw up. It's not intuitive.